Four nations will face off in 2025, and just two Penguins will be part of those four nations. Hunter and I are going to break down the rosters and more on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
Your Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social media platforms at Synonym for Wet. Joined as always by my co-host, the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter by just typing in his name, Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's account on Twitter a follow at LO_Penguins. And of course, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. Plus, if you're following us on YouTube, don't forget to hit that notification button so you'll be alerted to every time we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Before we dive in today, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hunter, we finally have all the rosters for all four nations for the upcoming Four Nations face-off in 2025. A little bit of an appetizer before we get back to the 2026 Winter Olympics, which the NHL will once again send its players and coaches to. Thank God for that, because there is nothing better than international competition with the absolute best being on each nation's roster. But low-key, I gotta say this, I was skeptical at first on the idea of the Four Nations face-off because the NHL never really gives us much reason to be anything but skeptical. But looking at the rosters for all four of these teams, this is gonna be a really fun tournament to watch. We just gotta hope that there is buy-in from the players and coaches, which, considering how passionate so many players have been about wanting to get back to the international stage, it does feel like we are going to get some buy-in from them. This won't be a glorified all-star weekend where these guys just go on a little vacation to Montreal, Boston, Toronto, where it's going to be played, and they're actually going to get after it to play for their respective countries. So that's going to be very exciting. As for our show, since this is Locked On Penguins, there's only going to be a little bit of Penguins participation in this tournament. Obviously, head coach Mike Sullivan will serve as the head coach for Team USA, both at this tournament and in the 2026 Winter Olympics. Sidney Crosby is on Team Canada, as to be expected, and defenseman Erik Karlsson is on Team Sweden. So cool to see that we got still a couple guys on these international rosters. Obviously, someone like Evgeny Malkin, we imagine, would have been on Russia if Russia was allowed to participate, but I digress. Overall, though, Hunter, you look at these rosters. Team USA, absolutely stacked. Team Canada, maybe the best forward group in the tournament. Finland and Sweden, very deep on both sides of the puck. So this could be a very fun tournament, and I think it's going to exist on a razor's edge.
It's going to be a lot of fun. It's been a long time since we've gotten true international hockey. I mean, we haven't had this since the 2016 World Cup of Hockey. Before that, we hadn't had it since, the Olympics in 2014. When they go back to the Olympics in 26, it's going to be the first time in 12 years that we get Olympic hockey. For next year, this will be the first time in 9 years that we get international hockey. It's a crime that we've had to wait this long for best on best competition, but I'm so happy that we're finally getting it. You look at these four rosters, they're all very good. These games are going to be fairly close. Even the weakest team, if you want to call Finland that, Finland still can put up a really good team. You already have, for example, Sebastian Aho and Rupe Hintz, they're awesome. You have Mikko Ranson, you have Sasha Barkov. You can really go Barkov and Aho down the middle That is one heck of a 1-2 punch. You can put Rantanen with Barkov. That's going to be a ton of fun, man. I mean, seeing those two as a combo go up against the other team's best combos on their top lines, that's going to be awesome. Seeing Barkov go up against potentially McDavid for Canada, Matthews for Team USA, and then whoever else for Sweden, we'll get to them in a second. That's going to be great. Finland, their defense is a little shaky for me. They do have Miro Heiskanen, which is great, Esa Lindell, but they have kind of a bunch of number 3, number 4 defensemen after that. But then goaltending-wise, you have UC Saros. He's the answer in net. Yeah, I know Nashville has not been very good this year, but you put this team in front of him, I think he's going to perform really well. You then after that, you have Team Sweden, and you look at this forward group, man, it is fan-freaking-tastic. You have players like Philip Forsberg and William Nylander who can really hurt you off the rush. You have other players like Lucas Raymond and Elias Pettersson who can really hurt you with the way they forecheck, the way they cycle the puck. You defensively, that is their bread and butter, I think. There was a couple analysts I saw a few weeks ago saying like, well, why should Erik Karlsson be on this team? Because he drives offense. You're not going to get defensive play from him, but you have other players on this Swedish team that can play defense. I mean, Gustav Forsling is arguably the best defensive defenseman in today's game right now. He is fantastic for the Panthers. Ekholm is great in his own zone. Jonas Brodin is still very good. I'm so excited to watch Rasmus Dahlin as well for the first time in international competition. That's going to be awesome. And then, of course, Canada and the U.S. I wasn't alive in 96, which I know a lot of people say that's the best USA hockey team ever. This one's just about there with the amount of talent that Team USA has. And no, Pat, you're not allowed to use my Austin Matthews joke during this segment. So you know what? Get lost. You have Austin Matthews, you have Jack Eichel and Jack Hughes down the middle. That's disgusting. It really is. This is the closest that Team USA has gotten to matching Canada's talent in terms of forwards. They got this roster for the most part right. Do I think both Trocheck and Kreider should be on here? No, I would have taken one off, put Tage Thompson or Cole Caulfield on there because they've had better seasons. I don't think Kreider's having that good of a year. Trocheck's been fine, but he hasn't been as good as last year. I would have taken maybe one of the Rangers. Yeah, perfect world, I would have not taken either of them and put both Tage and Caulfield here. But again, I'm kind of nitpicking.
I also will say this. Bill Guerin said this on TNT to the panel when they asked him about the rosters, and he basically said he was one of the people who was advocating for 25-man rosters rather than 23 because the IIHF in all other competition allows a 25-man roster, whereas this is not an IIHF tournament. This is an NHL tournament, so they stuck with 23. And Guerin basically came out and said, listen, I'm following the rules. These are the decisions we're making as Team USA, but I think you can figure come 2026, some of the guys that you might count as snubs for the Four Nations face-off, assuming they don't fall off of a cliff. Plus, you also have to keep this in mind. The two players you named come 2026, they're going to have a lot more miles on their body going into that. So they might not even be, I don't want to say not in consideration, but their stock may drop. The other thing I wanted to add here is, to your point, you look at Team USA, look at a lot of these names, right? Adam Fox, Quinn Hughes, Matt Boldy, Jack Eichel, Gensel, Jack Hughes, Dylan Larkin, Austin Matthews, Brock Nelson to a certain extent, the Tkachuk brothers. These guys aren't grizzled vets. These guys are young. They're going to play for the team. They're going to play in the Team USA system for quite a while. And then you go to Canada's roster and Sidney Crosby, a little bit Nathan McKinnon, but not as much. Brad Marchand, Braden Point, Mark Stone, Alex Pietrangelo, Devin Taves. These guys are a little bit older. And yeah, there's still going to be plenty of talent in the Canadian system because they churn out hockey players that nobody's business. But the fact that some of the biggest drivers for Team USA are still early to mid 20s and have a lot of good hockey around them, assuming they stay healthy, Team USA is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Then you add in this fact that, let's compare this. In net for the United States, it's going to be one of Connor Hellebuck, Jake Ottinger, or Jeremy Swayman.
It will be Hellebuck.
It'll be Hellebuck, but those are your three goalies.
Yeah.
Then we go look at Canada. Jordan Binnington, Aiden Hill, Sam Montembeault. You can see how Canada constructed this roster. They understood that they don't have the goaltending depth they once did. They are going to try to outscore their problems, and rightfully so.
100%. And I mean, they don't have Carey Price anymore. I mean, he was always that great goalie that they could rely on for big saves. They could play these, 1-0, 2-1, heck, even 3-2 games against the United States, Sweden, and all that way back when, because they had Carey Price in net, who was the best goaltender in the league at that time. They don't have him anymore. It's guys who are fine, but again, it's not Connor Hellebuck. It's not Jeremy Swayman. It's not Jake Onger. It's not Linus Ullmark, UC Soros, Philip Gustafsson, all those guys. That's definitely the weakest part of that roster. And I am excited to see who Crosby plays with at Team Canada. I assume one of the players he's going to play with is Brad Marchand. You remember, Pat, he played with Marchand at the World Cup of Hockey and at the Olympics as well. He loved playing with Marchand and Bergeron. They were always stapled to his line. He loved playing with them. I would very much assume that John Cooper is going to have Marchand with Crosby. And heck, maybe we put Nathan McKinnon next to him as well. They easily could do that. They could go 1-2-3 down the middle with McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, which would be a lot of fun. But they also could go McDavid as the top line center, Crosby at number 2, with McKinnon next to him along with Marchand. That would be so much fun to watch. I kind of
the all Nova Scotia line.
Yes, legitimately. I think that would be awesome. We all know that Crosby is going to be the captain of this team. I mean, that's no secret here. That's not breaking news. It's Sidney Crosby and really still no one else at this point. If someone wants to argue for Connor McDavid, okay, whatever, but it's still going to be Sidney Crosby, I think, to virtually everyone. But again, the U.S., I think this is Team USA's best shot at dethroning Canada in a best on best in quite a bit here. I know we haven't had it in a long time, but talent-wise, this is the best shot that the U.S. has had in so long because of the forwards they have. Defensively, they're very strong, and they have the answer and net. I'm super excited for the Tkachuk brothers to hopefully be on one line together to piss off everyone on Team Canada, but they'll be going up against Sam Bennett also, who is on Team Canada. That's going to be a lot of fun. If there was one snub that maybe Canada had, I would have potentially brought Bouchard or Hamilton. I don't think you need both Colton Parayko and Travis Sanheim on Team Canada. I think one of them is fine, but again, that's just me being nitpicky. I get some people have gripes about Bouchard and his defense, and people do have the point when you say like, oh, he's not going to get top power play time because that's Cale Makar, but still, if you're asking me, I'd rather have Bouchard there over at least one of Parayko or Sanheim. Again, just my opinion, but for Team USA, they mostly got this right. And for the other two countries as well, those rosters are very strong. It is unfortunate that Rickard Rakell is not going to be on Team Sweden. He had a really good quote to the local media this week. He was not happy about not being selected Team Sweden. And he even said at the end, he wants to prove everyone wrong. So maybe he's on the Olympic team in 26.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to see that fire and that motivation is there for someone like Rickard Rakell. Couple that with the start to the season that he's had, that might be very good news for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But that's going to do it for this first segment. Four Nations Face-Off coming at you in February 12th through the 20th in both Montreal and Boston. I said Toronto. I forgot that was in discussion when there was some issues with Montreal, but that has since been resolved. So again, February 12th through the 20th, the Four Nations Face-Off. That'll kick off then. But like I said, that's going to do it for this segment. When we come back, we're going to look at some news and notes from practice with the Pittsburgh Penguins from the last couple of days. But before we do that, we got to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we're back here on the Thursday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp alongside the one and only Hunter Hodes. And we kind of didn't get around to too much of this yesterday because we were so in depth talking about what a bizarre win that was over the Florida Panthers earlier this week. But a lot of things to touch on from practice the last 2 days with the Penguins. First and foremost, something that we did miss is that Jack St. Ivany has been sent down to Wilkes-Barre Scranton. Our good pal, Taylor Haas, she did some good reporting on this, talking to what Mike Sullivan had to say about St. Ivany getting reassigned to the AHL. And he brought up something that we have spoken about on this show, saying, quote, "We don't think Jack has had his best game here for a while. We tried to give him an opportunity to play through that process here, and we just felt that that's not an easy thing to do for a young player. Recently, he's been in and out of the lineup a little bit, but for a long stretch, he was in the lineup, and we were trying to give him an opportunity to find his way and capture his best game," end quote. I think that kind of sums it up for Jack St. Ivany. I do think, and it's not a large gulf, but I do think Ryan Shea has been a little bit better than St. Ivany. And like I said, while it's not a lot, it's been enough that St. Ivany, in his opportunities, like Sullivan said, hasn't really picked up the ball and ran with it. So it's probably best for him to go get some playing time down in the AHL and see if he can figure it out.
I agree, but also disagree at the same time. I definitely agree that St. Ivany has had a little bit of a sophomore slump this year. He hasn't been nearly as good as he was to end last season. His numbers are down a little bit. Even the eye test, he's been out of position in his own zone. He's not making the same plays that he was in the offensive zone. Definitely agree there, but I don't know if he's been worse than Ryan Shea. I think Shea has still been a bit worse than him this year, in my opinion, but I do understand why they sent him down to try and work out some of those kinks in his game, and then they can bring him back up whenever. I wanted to see more of Shea and St. Ivany together because that pairing was fairly decent for them at the end of last season, and it looked like that was going to be the case last week when Grzelcyk was probably going to be a healthy scratch until Pickering got sick and then Grzelcyk had to come back in. But this also does allow Pickering to keep playing in the lineup, which he should be. I mean, there's really no reason to send him down to Wilkes-Barre right now, if not at all this season, with how he continues to progress and show that he's NHL ready. But I do hope that this is not a long stint for St. Ivany in Wilkes-Barre. I think he has shown that he has what it takes to play in the NHL. It's just, again, working out some of those kinks, and then once he's ready, he can come back up. But I do think, once, maybe a move is made around the deadline, Matt Grzelcyk maybe gets sent out, I think St. Ivany will definitely be playing full time, but I think he'll also be up there before then too. But I still think he's been a bit better than Shea this year. But again, I get why they send him down.
I would say it's more of a burden of expectation than it is anything else. Again, in no world do I think Ryan Shea has been tremendous. I don't think he's been one of the better defensemen, but the expectation for Jack St. Ivany is a little bit higher. You want him to play a little bit more of a significant role on the defense. Whereas with Ryan Shea, you just want him to eat up those minutes, not be a liability. And I think for the most part, Shea has done that. Whereas, like I said, you want St. Ivany to be a little bit more of a driver and a little bit more dependable, which he has been in some cases, hasn't been in a lot of others. So you want him to go get right. You want him to get back on that track so you can use him more consistently. So I agree overall with that. Other thing to note that we do have to bring up, no real changes in the Penguins lineup at practice today. Basically, they're going to roll out the same unit that they have been rolling out during this 4-game win streak. On one hand, definitely understand that. Don't know if I agree with it, but when you're on a 4-game winning streak, it's not broken. Don't really need to try to fix it. But at the same time, Jesse Puljujuarvi, I know it's become a little bit of a meme between me and Hunter about how much we like Jesse Puljujuarvi, but I at this point, I just don't understand what else he has to do to get into the lineup and remain there.
I hear you, man. And shout out to Danny Shirey. He put out some really good stats about how great Puljujarvi has been for the Penguins this year for some underlying numbers. Go check him out on social media at Danny Shirey PGH. Again, really good tweet. It showcases just how good he's been. And even before he tweeted that, you and I have been discussing that for these last couple of weeks. Sullivan's usage with Puljujarvi is super strange, man. He's been a bright spot for this team. Even before this 4-game winning streak, he had been playing well. The underlying numbers were there. He's been passing the eye test. When he's on the ice, the Penguins are generating. But you're taking him out of the lineup for a veteran or two who just aren't playing that well. And I'll get to Matt Nieto here and maybe to a lesser extent, Noel Acciari, Kevin Hayes, because I feel like Puljujarvi should at least be in the lineup over one of those three players, Pat. We were discussing this before we started recording. Kevin Hayes, he's been up and down, but I think Hayes just needs some help right now. He's not getting any help on that fourth line with Nieto and Acciari. And let's face it, you're not going to get a lot of offense on that type of fourth line. It's mainly just going to be defense. If anyone's giving you offense, it's probably Hayes. But considering his age, considering the type of player that he is, he needs a little bit of help. And Puljujarvi can be the kind of help that he needs on that line. Acciari, bit of a mixed bag this year. He's had some good games. His physical presence has been there. He's been good on the penalty kill. But there's also been some games where I'm like, okay, I'm not noticing you, kind of like last year. And then you have Matt Nieto, who I applaud him for coming back from all of those surgeries. Great job. I even said on this show, those first 2 to 3 games, he looked like a competent NHL player that can play in the bottom 6. He was passing the eye test. But after those first 2 to 3 games, it's all gone downhill where I'm just not really noticing him that much. And I feel like you should be able to scratch one of these veterans to put Puljujarvi in there and see what he can do. It doesn't even have to be Nieto. It can be a different veteran. You're not going to scratch Michael Bunting. You're not going to scratch Blake Lizotte. He's played really well since coming back in from his second concussion, But you should be able to make room for Puljujarvi over one of the 3 veterans that I just mentioned.
Right. The suggestion I had when we were talking before we hit record was you can kind of treat this the way that they have been treating the bottom pairing throughout the season, where you're cycling in a couple of guys.
Right.
And I think the main one is Matt Nieto. I know that they want to give him an extended look because he's finally healthy, and I understand that. However, both Nieto and Puljujarvi kind of suffer from the same type of issue. They play well for 2, 3, 4 games. They tail off for 3 or 4 games. And if that's the case, just run them on that schedule. Just say, all right, Matt Nieto is going to play 2, 3, 4 games. Then Puljujarvi is going to play 2 to 3, 4 games. And once you get into late December, early January, the mandate from Sullivan has to be the onus is now on you. You need to play well enough for me to keep you in the lineup. And eventually somebody has to take that spot and grab it. Because I understand everybody's frustration. God knows I'm leading the bandwagon for Jesse Puljujarvi and have been for a year now. But the problem is, good as he's been, he has not been able to put it together consistently for an extended stretch. He will play well for a few games, then he'll kind of disappear for a little bit. And I understand the numbers are good. The underlyings are good, but we have seen it from him his entire career. He cannot play to a consistent level, but at the same time now, he started this season and this preseason really well. Give him the opportunity to do it. And it can't be a one mistake, one strike, you're out policy.
And that's the thing. I think he has been mostly consistent this year. I don't really think he's tailed off too often. That's where I think I maybe disagree a little bit, because you look at some more of the numbers here, 20 games for the Penguins this year, a little over 200 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time. When he's on the ice, the Penguins have almost 52% of the shot attempts. They also have right around 50% of the scoring chances, 45 high danger chances for, 37 high danger chances against, 5 high danger goals for, 2 high danger goals against. He's been great in the defensive zone. He's generating play, especially in the offensive zone. The numbers are very good. He's passing the eye test. I think, in my opinion, this has been probably one of his more consistent seasons in terms of how he's looked on a game-to-game basis compared to other seasons where I think that's been the case where he's tailed off at times. Of this year, I don't really think that's been the case. I get that Sullivan wants to see what he has a little bit in the veterans, but I think it's past time at this point to take one of these guys out and put Puljujarvi back in and give him a run at games. When healthy, I'll keep saying it, he is one of your 12 best forwards. We were talking about this a week or two ago when he first came out of the lineup and started being scratched a little bit. It made no sense at the time. It makes still no sense now.
Yeah, it's really baffling just because, again, while I still hold steadfast on he's got to find extended consistency, I also understand and acknowledge that he hasn't really been given the best opportunity, which I don't understand. Yeah. But that is going to do it for this second segment. When we come back, we didn't get a chance really to touch on this earlier in the week, so we definitely got to touch on it now. The Penguins, they now have even more of their fingerprints on the United States Hockey Hall of Fame, including 2 former champions being inducted on Wednesday night. We'll get into that when we come back right after this. All right, welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Penguins. One more time, I'm Patrick Damp, joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. And what a celebratory night it was on Wednesday night in Pittsburgh, no less. The United States Hockey Hall of Fame welcomed its latest class, and the Penguins' fingerprints were all over this one. 2 of the inductees, 2 back-to-back champions with the Pittsburgh Penguins. The team dad from the 2016-2017 championships, Matt Cullen, is inducted to the United States Hockey Hall of Fame. Joining him in this year's class was arguably one of, if not the best power forward from the 1990s, Kevin Artie Stevens. I am going to kick it off by saying this, Hunter. I'm not wearing this hat by mistake. It was completely by design because I've said this line on the show. I've said it on social media. I've said it in my everyday life. Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr got me into hockey. Kevin Stevens made me love hockey. And the last thing I'll say about Kevin Stevens before we wax poetic about him a little more, you can go ahead and keep Mark Messier's "We'll win Game 7. Give me Kevin Stevens in Boston. We are going to win 4 straight. And damn if he didn't back those words up. And the Penguins went on to win their first Stanley Cup.
We're biased, but yeah, that's still better than Mark Messier's guarantee. I'll still take Kevin Stevens' word any day of the week, but I know I wasn't alive for a lot of those moments, but man, he was such a boy with the puck on his stick. Just going back and looking at the film of him during the early 90s with the Penguins, the way that he was able to help lead them to the Stanley Cups in the 90s. He was a bully, Pat. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. He was like, okay, I have the puck on my stick. I'm going through you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And he was an absolute treat to watch. Again, just going back and looking at the highlights and looking at the film. My mom always used to tell me stories about some of the goals that he would score. That was her second favorite player in Penguins history, right behind Paul Coffey. He was such a delight to watch, and I'm super happy that he was able to get into the United States Hockey Hall of Fame. I'm also super happy that he's doing so well now, man. That's what makes me so happy too. You saw how happy he was when earlier this year, remember, Jagr gets his jersey retirement, and Artie's there just smiling, reminiscing with Jagr and everyone. And you can tell this place still means so much to him with everything he accomplished here with the Penguins. And there was a lot of Penguins royalty at that ceremony last night. I mean, 66 was there. He's not around too much anymore, obviously, because Fenway Sports owns the team and such, but it's great seeing Lemieux come back. Crosby was there, Craig Patrick, Mike Sullivan, Jim Rutherford, Ronnie Francis was there, Mark Recchi, obviously Artie Stevens, Matt Cullen. A lot of great Penguins royalty was in the house for that, and that makes me so happy. And also, of course, congratulations to Matt Cullen, man. I mean, the team dad from 2016 and 17, so many big goals for this team. I'll always remember the third period, game 3 against the Rangers in 2016. That game is tied. Penguins are outplaying them, and Cullen, he gets the game winner in that game, and the Penguins went on to fully dominate the Rangers in the rest of that series. I also remember how much he cooked Kevin Shattenkirk during that series against the Washington Capitals in 2017 as well. And whenever you needed a quote that wasn't from the big three, Cullen was always like, hey, come on over. I'm here to speak about the team. He was always such a big leader in that locker room. And I also felt old today, by the way, because I saw the video the Penguins tweeted out, and Matt Cullen's kids look like they're all 18. And I'm like, they were just like 9, 11, 13. I'm like, my God, it's been that long. Literally, like one of them looked like could have been almost 21. I was like, geez, we are all getting old at this point because they look so tall. Just a really funny thing. But I'm still so happy for both of them, and they have contributed so much to this organization over the years.
They really have. And you said it all about Matt Cullen. I don't want to downplay his significance to the Penguins championships in 16-17. Yeah, Crosby, Malkin, and Letang were, by all accounts, veterans at that point. They weren't the young guys that needed veteran leadership, but that team needed a veteran of that kind of stature, just a guy who was going to contribute, but he wasn't going to be a driver of the bus, a guy who could, kind of take, like you said, that pressure off them, especially when it came to non-hockey things, whether it was interviews post game or just having his kids around and kind of being a character, very similar to what Bill Guerin brought in 2009, where, he's a contributor, he's helping out, but at the end of the day, he's not a guy that you need to be a driver of the bus. But one more thing that I got to add, well, two, because it's about Kevin Stevens, but first and foremost, I watched it back today. There is a mini documentary. You can find it on YouTube from Sportsnet called Shattered, and it's about Kevin Stevens' road to recovery. Very heavily recommend that. It will be difficult to watch for some because it deals with a lot of very heavy issues, including drug usage and addiction, but it really shows you how much this man has had to overcome to get to where he is now as a scout with the Penguins and getting his life back on track. But it's very well worth your time. But back to the player of Kevin Stevens. When those Penguins teams of the 90s, the early 90s, were coming up, becoming contenders, Mario Lemieux, Paul Coffey, Larry Murphy, Jaromir Jagr, Ron Francis, those guys, those names come up all the time. But you cannot go without mentioning Kevin Stevens. Just listen to this 3-year run from Kevin Stevens in the regular season. 90-91, 40 goals, 86 points in 80 games. 91-92, 54 goals, 123 points in 80 games. 92-93, a little bit of injury, unfortunate injuries for him, not counting the injury in the playoffs, but 72 games, 55 goals, 111 points. In the early 1990s, man, he was the best power forward in the game, and he was on a team that already had all of those names I just mentioned. So an absolute embarrassment of riches for the Penguins in the early 90s, but chief among them, and I hate to say this because it sounds so crappy to say, but man, if he had not gone through the struggles he had gone into, it would not just be the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. It would be the Hockey Hall of Fame for Kevin Stevens.
100%. And he was also so clutch in the playoffs for the Penguins when it really mattered. I mean, Pat, 90-91, 17 goals, 33 points in 24 games. The year after, 91-92, 13 goals, 28 points in 21 games. Well over a point per game in both. And even in 92-93, 5 goals, 16 points in 12 games. For his career in the playoffs, he had 46 goals, 106 points in 103 games. Whenever the Penguins needed something big in the playoffs, Artie was always there to deliver.
just an absolute menace of a player. So congratulations to him. Congratulations to Matt Cullen. Congratulations to the Salt Lake City U.S. sled hockey team that also was inducted, along with one of the best U.S. women's Olympic players in program history, Brianna Decker. Awesome night. Awesome that it happened here in our city of Pittsburgh. So congratulations to them. And thank you, as always, for tuning in to Locked On Penguins. That is going to do it for us on this edition. We will be back tomorrow to get you set for a weekend back-to-back against the New York Rangers and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But for now, for Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp. Thank you again for tuning in. We'll be back in your podcast feeds on Friday. And thanks, as always, for tuning in.